Dr. Archie, Brandy, if I may.
Yes, you may.
All right. You have said that your work helps people stay in their homes with dignity. Was there a specific person or moment that pushed you to go from care provider to solution builder?
Oh, you know what? There's a particular moment that stands out. I was kind of already starting to do the entrepreneurship thing, but this really made me feel like, whew, I gotta do this really well and do more of it. And so I was sent out to a patient's house or client's house from a local provider of community services. So this was not a healthcare client, right?
Okay.
They were trying to help her stay living in her home, and they were noticing challenges, but they don't go to the house all the time. They don't have a medical perspective, and they were like, hey, can you go out there and take a look and see what's going on? So when I walked into this lady's home, she lived by herself. She's a proud Black woman who lived not that far from here and had been in the house a very long time, but she was sleeping, sitting up in her walker because she had a bedroom upstairs. She couldn't do the stairs anymore. She couldn't even get out of her recliner anymore. And so in order to not bother anybody, she was like, had a bunch of pillows and was sleeping, sitting up in a rollator, which you're really not supposed to be sitting in that thing for that long. And that had this whole cascading set of events, right? So like she had really swollen legs. The doctor tells you to put your legs up in order to deal with the swelling. She can't do that because she's not even laying down in bed. Her commode was right next to her. Everything was like in the same amount of space that we're sitting in, maybe even less, even though she had a whole house. And she was just bound and determined to stay there. And she was doing it, but her life was so much smaller by forcing that. And so with a few simple solutions and a little bit of coordination, we were able to like help her to thrive, right? And like have a bed on the first floor and clear out the clutter. And one time I came back to see her and she was sitting on her porch, which is one of the things that she really wished that she could go back to doing, but she just couldn't do it. Because she wasn't going to the doctor, her swelling was too bad, and all these things that happen over time that then become an elephant on your chest. And so that stood out to me because there are so many people like that. And I've seen so many in my career as an occupational therapist struggle like that because who wants to ask for help? Mostly none of us. But just a few simple things were needed and a little bit of coordination. Somebody to actually pay attention to the whole picture and not just prescribe her pills for her swelling or send her a piece of equipment that she actually can't put together and didn't have a place for in her house. So that made me feel like, okay, we need to do something that allows for everybody to get access to the answers.
Yeah, I mean, this is it seems like one of those things that everybody can kind of relate to in some way, shape, or form. I mean, I think back, when you're telling that story, I'm like, that was my grandmother. Mm-hmm. She lived in a small house in Huntington, West Virginia, but she was confined to her living room and really to her recliner.
Yep.
And that was really her life for the last, I don't know how long. And it was, so this seems to be one of those things that is very relatable. I want to get to some of the challenges around that. But before I do, I want to take a step back and talk about kind of this occupational therapy ecosystem. Explain this economy to me. Explain this, how this moves. Are there a lot of freelance OTs? Are there, what are some of the headwinds that you see in this industry, in this segment in general?
Yeah, I think the first thing we should start off is like, most people encounter occupational therapy through the healthcare system. Okay. So their doctor has prescribed it because an acute event has happened and it's changed their level of function. OT's job is to help make sure that you can be safe and as independent as possible taking care of yourself across the lifespan. And so if something changes that, then somebody will be triggered to be like, oh, you need an occupational therapist, right? So we have very clear pathways for that. You get a surgery, you get OT in the hospital, you get OT at home, you get OT for outpatient, right? However, because our lens is really to help people live life better, it shouldn't be confined to the healthcare ecosystem in the medical space. And so there is a big movement of occupational therapists out of the clinic and into the niches in the community, whether they're doing pelvic floor health or they're doing mother and baby and like maternal health and mental health or home modifications. Like all those things are important for living a good life, but they're not triggered by an acute incident that would normally push you through the medical model. And so people have lots of really cool niches that they work in and ways that they want to put their OT out there, but there's a lot of barriers to doing it. 76% of OTs want to be in entrepreneurship or interested in it,
Really?
but only 4% are doing it.
Really?
Yeah.
Why is that? I mean, is it just the lack of then entrepreneurial support for that segment? Is it that I mean, it's tough to make that jump. Let's just be honest. Is that fear, kind of uncertainty and doubt that exists there? What do you think?
I think yes and yes. I think it's not enough support. That's part of the reason why we're doing what we're doing. But the other thing I think is that we go to school and we learn all this expansive knowledge about all these different things. This is why OTs do all kinds of different stuff, because it's about living life and everybody's life is different. And then you get into a job and then you're squished into this box. And so the things that you idealized when you're in school to do, you're not able to do because the medical model's payment system doesn't work for that. And so that's why I think people are really interested in doing it. It's also the reason why I think it's hard to jump out of it, because becoming a Medicare provider or dealing with billing or all of the complexities that come around insurance-based care is a challenge. And some stuff that we do is not really covered by your medical insurance. Like, it's outside of what they feel is their scope.
Right.
But wouldn't we be better off if we were preventing things? We were doing things in effort to have a better life up front so we don't go into the medical model?
Yeah.
And so many of those things are not currently paid for.
Yeah, that seems to be an overarching challenge in healthcare today, is that we keep treating the back end, we keep treating the symptoms, we keep treating, we're not preventing outcomes, we're just treating outcomes.
That's
so
right.
It seems like that's magnified in this space in a lot of different ways. So in innovation circles, this segment seems to get overlooked a lot. Those with disabilities, the aging population in general. Why do you think that is, and how can we shift that focus? What needs to happen there?
I think the main thing is that people think it's already taken care of. So if you meet somebody and you see that let's say had a surgery, a total knee replacement, you expect, because they had a knee replacement, they're gonna go through this system, it's gonna be covered by their insurance, and whatever they need in order to get back to life is gonna be covered by their insurance, and so that we have a process, we don't need to fix it. It's not until you actually do it that you realize there's a ton of holes in the process, and that your insurance may not cover home health, and that you might have a cap of only a few visits of outpatient, that wasn't enough, and that the modifications you need for your home are not covered by insurance. And so if everybody only encounters that awareness one at a time when it actually happens in your life, there's no big push to be like, hey, we need to change this.
So what's the human impact when someone finally gets the right support to navigate their space, and how do you measure that value?
I'm gonna start with personal impact, and then I wanna talk about societal impact.
Okay.
So the personal impact is that the person lives a better quality of life. That's trackable. There's tools to ask people questions. We've done the research to help understand the impacts of what occupational therapy plus the right adaptive equipment and resources and services can do for improving quality of life. And I think that's the main thing. It's you want to go back to living. I don't want to fix my knee or my hip just to live a worse life after that. I'm alive, but I'm not living, right? So that's the measurable impact on somebody's individual life. But that has carry-on effects. If we think about the example of somebody's grandmother. We're talking about a grandmother who, instead of sitting in their chair and being sedentary in that one place, which means they're not moving, which means their bowels probably aren't moving very well, we're getting constipated, we're taking pills for that, we're probably dehydrated because she doesn't want to get up and go to the bathroom frequently because it's hard to do. That causes all these medical problems, and now you're coming in to try to take her to the doctor's appointments and help with all these problems, and it's this cascading effect. How does that impact your life? You're taking time off work. You're maybe traveling to go help take care of her. Your family is maybe suffering because you're spending more time focused there. The caregiver economy impacts on the economy are huge. 1 in 4 people who are working a full-time job today are caregivers for somebody else. And so that's productivity lost, right? That's GDP lost, And so there's really magnifies the impact, especially now because the number of older adults is increasing greater than the number of kids we're having. So we're only gonna have more impacts of this.
You've recently launched a new initiative, OT Connected.
Mm-hmm.
So, this creating a community for occupational therapists. How does that better support clients, and also how does that better support the ecosystem at large?
Two things happened at the same time. I started AskSAMIE in the effort to try to multiply what I was doing so that you didn't have to encounter me personally, you could get the information. And when we did that and turned that into a digital product, people still wanted to reach out to an individual, right? The 80-year-olds of today would much prefer to have you come to your home. And so because I was building a private practice and the OT economy is not that big, people found out what I was doing, and I started getting questions about, like, how did you do this? Where'd you get started with this? And I was happy to tell people. They're all in their own communities all over the country, even other OTs here in Kansas City. Like, there's so many more people than I can see by myself. And so I was answering the same questions over and over. And so it made sense to me that if we're able to better support occupational therapists to either go into side gig work or start their own full business, that there's more practitioners to provide the care that the families and the older adults were looking for. And so if we prop up both sides of the marketplace, then they get to connect together, then everybody wins, essentially.
Sure. Strengthen the whole thing, yeah. So you've now, I want to shift a little bit to your experience as an entrepreneur, as a founder.
Okay.
So you've now launched 3 ventures that I know of.
Yeah.
So Accessible Living, AskSAMIE, and now the latest with OT Connected. What's something you do differently now than when you started the first venture?
I tell everybody about it first before it becomes a thing.
Okay, why is that?
So,
Why do you do that? I know why I do it. Why do you do that?
when I started Accessible Living, which was my private practice, I felt like if I had all my ducks in a row and then I was ready to take on the people and I hung my shingle out and I said, I'm here for business, that then the business would come and I would work. But it took me a year to build what I wanted to build for in-house, and that was important stuff we needed to have, but I didn't start talking about it until after I had it in hand and I thought it was like ready to go. And then it took me another year to like generate enough business within the community to really be running a business and having enough referrals. Had I been doing both things at the same time, once I was ready, the community would have been ready to send me referrals too. And so our speed to market would have been faster.
Was that year full of feedback that made you change your approach a little bit over that year, or was it just building the momentum and the awareness and all of those elements?
Oh, you mean the year in which I was like, I'm here, and then I was like, okay, where are the patients? Let me find them.
Yep.
I think there's always feedback if you're paying attention and listening. I didn't know what I was doing though, so I wasn't tracking everything like I would track everything now. And we did make a fair amount of pivots. You know, like in our business model, I started by wanting to charge for my assessment. If you are an OT, you bill for the things that you do. But nobody knew me and weren't used to paying out of pocket for therapy, and so that didn't work. I flipped the whole thing on its head and we sold equipment and made the assessment free. You know, that got people in the door. So like had I not been asking those questions and like trying different things, I wouldn't have gotten to that point.
That makes sense, So AskSAMIE is about turning care navigation into a guided experience. What did it take to get the first version off the ground, and what's evolved since?
Yeah, it took a lot. So coming from a clinical perspective, I was not a tech founder. I guess I am now, but I didn't have that knowledge. So the first thing that I ended up being able to do was taking a class called Tech Venture at SBDC, and it was like specifically for people who are non-tech founders to get into tech. And that was really helpful because it gave me a lot of confidence that I could figure out all the pieces that I needed to pull in to do it.
Is this a Charlotte Clark shout out right now? Was she leading that?
She was.
Yeah. All right.
And so that really helped me navigate the pathway that I needed to in order to do that. And then it also got me in contact with resources. Frankly, as a private practitioner, I wasn't connected to an ecosystem here of entrepreneurship. And once I took that class, I realized that there's a ton of support partners, but they're really focused on tech-based ventures. And so I was able to plug into that, and that helped me get the funding that I needed in order to create the MVP and meet the people that I needed to meet in order to get the first thing off the ground. What
advice would you give to non-technical founders now that you've been kind of, it's interesting to me to hear you describe yourself now as a technical founder. So starting as a non-technical founder, now kind of saying that you're a technical founder, what advice would you give to those who are coming behind you, and what was that journey like for you?
Okay, I'm gonna retract my statement.
Okay.
Willie is our technical co-founder.
Sure.
I still do not know how to code.
Okay.
But I am a founder of a tech business, so I have to own the fact that I'm a tech founder.
Okay.
So that's the thing, the language I'm trying to change, because that's okay and it's good.
Totally.
Even though I'm coming from a clinical perspective.
Love it.
And so the question is.
So what's that journey been like for you to now be a tech founder as a non-technical founder to begin?
Yeah, I think it was about like openness and willingness to learn. I've always been that kind of person. I like to learn new things, but just having a level, just enough confidence to be like, I could probably figure that out. And so if I was giving somebody else the advice, it would be that you can probably figure it out. Now, even more so, it ain't even been that many years since I've been doing this, but you know, the technology has like
For sure.
taken off completely. And so it used to be you just need to find the right app to plug into your thing to do the thing that you need to do, and you can string some stuff together. Now you don't even need that. You just need to know the right questions to ask and what prompts to do and plug the stuff up together yourself. And you don't need to have a perfect product in order to get started. And you need to put something out in the market so that the people can try it, you can get the feedback, and you can be like, oh, didn't even think about that? Let me change, let me add that, and you keep growing over time.
Yeah. You've received some recent recognition as a founder. You were recently awarded a grant from Black Ambition. Mm-hmm. What does that kind of national recognition do for you, do for a company like yours? What doors has it opened for you?
I think the national recognition is twofold importance. One, and the most important thing, is I think it gave me the confidence to say, like, I'm building a thing that other people recognize as being valuable. And even though you are passionate about the thing you're doing, sometimes it also feels like you're like doing it in the dark and you don't really know if this is like worth all this time and effort to do it. So when you get some level of recognition and people get what you're doing, it's like gratifying. And that's enough fuel to keep going. The other thing I think it does is it says that to other people too, so that they can be like, oh, this is not just a random startup. I maybe can work with them. Because in order for a business to grow, yes, I need the customers that come from searching on Google, they don't know about us, but they see our website and trust us enough to buy the product from it. But you also need like regular reoccurring revenue. And that comes from working with other businesses, in my opinion. And other businesses care about their business and don't need it going under because you didn't do what you were supposed to do, right? And so having some recognition gives them validation of like, okay, maybe I can consider taking the risk of working with a smaller business in order to fulfill said need and keep going.
Speaking of recognition, congratulations. You very recently were selected to participate in the Project W Tech Equity Hub for the 2025 cohort. What's that mean for you as a founder?
It is another level of recognition that is much bigger than me in the space that I can take up in physically here in Kansas City. But it also means that I get connected with a cohort of Black and brown women in tech. Like, that's super specific.
Yep.
And we have a super specific set of needs, I would guess, from like a ESO perspective. And I'm in a lot of communities, and I need a lot of community in order to keep going. So this means to me that I have another group of people to lean on, to ask questions to understand how they do things, and to learn from the people who are providing the accelerator. Like, give me the keys, tell me what I need to know in order to accelerate faster.
So I want to follow up on that, because you mentioned that you have a very specific set of needs or support from the ESO world. So as a Black woman founder in healthcare tech, what have you had to navigate that others don't see? And how do you stay grounded through it?
You know, this is like hard because it's not empirical evidence that you can be like, here.
Sure.
Well, that's not true. There are numbers. I mean, Black women get 0.02% of the investment funding, right? That's not unknown. But is that applying to me or not? I don't know, because I only show up with this face and this gender. So I think that being able to get people to take you seriously and think of you as shrewd is not a bad word to me, like a shrewd business person.
Sure. Responsible, accountable to the business.
Accountable, like, and it's going to go the distance. I think you're starting behind the start line. And because people have biases, we all have some level of them. And so if you're dealing with a bunch of people who maybe haven't encountered somebody like you, they might not have any good biases to go off of, right? And so I think that's a huge challenge of being able to communicate myself well enough and what we're doing in a way that helps make sure that people understand that no matter who it comes from, this is a big problem and it needs to be dealt with, and this person is capable of bringing it to fruition.
So if I were to think of Black ambition as maybe the national recognition, that stamp of approval, some credibility that comes with that, certainly grants don't hurt. The Project W seems to be a little bit more centered around fellowship.
Yeah.
What has fellowship meant to you? I mean, I listened to you talk about, pre-SBDC encounter, and there was no ecosystem. And now, you're in pipeline, you're, a Keystone co-resident. What has fellowship meant to you as an entrepreneur? What have you benefited from as it relates to kind of the fellowship that you've been in?
I feel like I'm 1 degree away from anybody I need to know. And so that's really helpful to feel like not alone is one thing, and that there's pockets of people that do their thing specifically, and when I encounter a problem, I know I can go to these people to help me go to the next step. And like, nobody can build my business for me and do all the things for me, but being able to know for sure that you have a way to get to an answer is really helpful. I think studies show that if you go to college, you make more money exponentially than somebody who doesn't. And the research shows that, yes, it's true because maybe your job pays you more than if you don't have a college education, but the real thing is the network. You don't end up spending as much money because I happen to know a lawyer who was my friend from freshman year, and I can just ask that lawyer a question. She'll be like, oh, yeah, you need to do this, instead of paying somebody. And I think the same thing is true in entrepreneurship. If you know enough people, then you can get to the answers that you need a little bit quicker and help you grow faster.
Entrepreneurial ecosystems are known for networking events.
Yes.
A lot of entrepreneurs avoid those because they feel like they need to be heads down in their business. I hear you and other founders talk about fellowship as an important element. I believe it's maybe one of the most under-recognized contributing factors to successful entrepreneurs is who is their network, how did that network come about, how active and healthy is it, and so on. What advice would you give to founders who are maybe reluctant to put their toe in kind of that ecosystem that you spoke of? Because I need to be heads down on my business. I don't have time to go build my network. Like, this doesn't seem like it's as important.
I think that's completely the wrong approach. I do think you got to balance it. You can't just be at every networking event because you do have to actually do some work in order to make the thing work. But if I think back about every trigger point that allowed us to level up or do another thing, it was tied to a person, right? Whether it was knowing somebody who happened to also know somebody on some panel or something that I was gonna be judged on, or a pitch competition, none of that hurts to know the people who are participating in this ecosystem, right?
Yeah.
And even just I met this person who introduced me to this person, and now I'm working with this business, right? I can draw a straight line to through the relationships to that. And so when I think about networking, I think more about building relationships, because I never know, you just literally never know what people are doing. I know what your job is, but half the time I meet somebody, I'm talking to them about their grandmother or their uncle, or, oh, in the past I was doing XYZ thing. And I'm like, oh, that's really cool because I'm trying to meet somebody over here. And what they do now is completely different than that, but they still have this whole set of people that they know over here that they can introduce you to. And so to me, it's you just never know. And people are the key. It's the relationships and the people that are the key.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. You're building a tech company for deeply personal spaces.
Yeah.
People's homes, mobility, care, the routines associated with that are very personal in so many ways. What's your design philosophy in designing tech in that situation?
It's client-centered. So that's the first thing I'm thinking about. You could think about what's the fastest way to build this? You could think about what's the cheapest way to build this? You could think about what will attract me the most investment. But we're thinking about what will be the easiest for my clients to access and what is it that they need. Whether the client is a family caregiver or a person who has their own disability looking for their own things, or another occupational therapy practitioner who's looking for help. Like, we have to come from their lens, and I think that's why it's super powerful to have entrepreneurs building things from within the landscape that they come from, right? Because you just know it more deeply. And so, well, if you think about it from that perspective, then it automatically includes all the things that you just said about, like, oh, well, might be a touchy subject. We should maybe talk about it like this or show it in this way. So yeah, I think client-centered is the key.
It's a powerful case for lived experience driving the entrepreneur, because you understand the empathy is already there, naturally there in so many ways. Hadn't thought about it that way until you said that. How to AskSAMIE and OT Connected, how do they fit together as an ecosystem? I think you've covered this a little bit, but are you trying to build a full stack approach to this market? Was that the thought in doing that, or was it more you just recognized a need from the OT community and decided to tackle that?
I think it's both. So I think I recognized a need, but then I was like, oh, this works so well together that if we build both of them, then it helps everybody. And so you do have to stay focused when you're trying to build a thing. So I did think really hard about this because we already been building AskSAMIE and gaining some level of traction, and there are a certain number of things that you could be doing or spending your time and effort towards in order to gain it. But go-to-market is always the key, right? That's the thing that everybody asks you about, and that's the thing that's most important. I can build something beautiful, and it works great, but if nobody knows about it, then what did I really do? So when we were thinking about go-to-market for AskSAMIE, the people who make the most recommendations for home modification and equipment are occupational therapists. So it's like, okay, well, what can I do to get them using it? It's a change in habit. They maybe already have a bunch of Amazon links that they use, or they have a store nearby that's what they refer to, or whatever. They got something that they're doing. I think it's less than what we are providing them, but they're already doing something. So how can I get them to be here in this space? And what is it that they need? And at the same time, I was getting all these questions about starting a business, and it seemed very prescient right now that, like, people are looking for that help and things are cropping up around, and I'm like, we need a comprehensive approach to that. Because really what the biggest problem was for me as a private practice owner, maybe not problem, but like thing that took the most time was finding clients. Once we found the clients, OTs are great at doing their service, but it's connecting together, right? Because there's no good place to do that within the society besides going through the hospital system. And so I was like, hey, we already got clients coming to AskSAMIE looking for a solution. We should just marry that with the support for OTs and get them connected to those people that are coming. And so it just made sense to build them both.
Still sounds like there was some, I don't want to say reluctance, maybe that's the wrong word, but certainly some thought that went into, is this out of focus? Is this too much? What was the ultimate trigger for you in that decision? What was the ultimate, like, no, this needs to happen?
I think it was the building them both would make them both better.
Okay.
It's not that one would take away from the other. It wasn't like, okay, I did this thing at AskSAMIE, I'm gonna turn my full attention to this other thing, and because I did, this might go down, but that's fine, I'm gonna do this, and that's gonna be my workhorse. You could make that decision, I guess, but when I thought about it, I was like, yes, we have a good thing going here. Fundraising was able to help me hire a business operations person, so once we did have the wheels turning at AskSAMIE, it can turn without me. So that was key. We had that in place, or we were just about ready to have that in place when we started OT Connected. So I was like, this is theoretically doable. But then once they both grow, right? And so they work super well together, and because of that, I didn't feel like it was too outside of the box.
What's the hardest thing about being an entrepreneur, in your opinion?
That's a good question. I hate absolute questions. I think the hardest thing is the uncertainty. And that's for me. I'm not gonna say this for everybody, because some people fly by the seat of their pants all the time. I'm not that person. I knew I was gonna be an OT when I was a freshman in high school. That's
Wow.
ridiculous.
Yeah.
Most of the people I went to OT school with didn't know about OT until we were at undergrad. So to know that early is like crazy. So I don't expect anybody to know that, but I'm just that kind of way, I guess. And so I have my ducks in a row, got a plan from freshman year all the way through graduating with my doctorate. I knew what every step was gonna be through that. And as an entrepreneur, you don't know that. And so my faith has grown significantly. And I'm a believer, and so that's been probably the reason God put me in this position, was to have more faith in him, because I can't know what the next, I don't know, year even is gonna be like for real. I have plans that I want to try to accomplish, but you don't really know. I mean, who knew COVID was coming? Who knows that tariffs are happening and all these things that you don't control that impact your business? And so I think that level of uncertainty is really challenging, because I wanna feel like I know what's gonna happen next.
Somebody said to me once, a good mentor is someone that helps you see around the next corner. And it struck me as, I had never thought of it. It was like someone who can give you advice, someone who you can lean into their experience or their network. But I never thought about the idea that a good mentor is one that's actually, one, helping you recognize there is a corner.
Yeah.
But two, helping you see around it, if based on that experience. So, you've made your career about helping people gain independence. What has building these companies taught you about your own leadership style?
I think the thing that it taught me to do is to understand that everybody is not like me, and to have grace for that. And just like from a high level, you know that, but are you actually operating that way? I wasn't really, because you start the business by yourself. Everything that you do is, you do it yourself, it's all in my head, but you can't grow if it's only you. And so that's not my first challenge, but the biggest challenge I had early on was like, okay, how can I expand what we're doing? Because I need to work on the business, not just in the business, seeing all the patients. Then I have to tell somebody else what I'm doing, what I'm thinking about, and why I think we should do that. And then they gotta be excited about doing it and see the vision and then fulfill it, right? And I also need somebody who's gonna take initiative to I see the vision, she gave me this lot of instructions. I probably can go this next couple of steps without asking, and then we'll talk about it later. And that requires a decent amount of leadership. And so I think that it helped me to be able to go through that process and then realize that I'm not that good at it, and then get some more education around it and learn more about how my words, my body language, the tone of my voice all impacts the way that we communicate, especially because we are a digital first company, right? Even when I had a private practice, a lot of my communication to my other OTs was virtually. And so, I don't know, it made me have to slow down. So I think my leadership style is one that is not micromanaging, but probably doesn't provide as much support as it needs to. So I focus on giving more support, so people don't feel overwhelmed.
Had you been in a position to manage people or manage a team, build a team before?
As an occupational therapist, you often work with occupational therapy assistants. And that affords some level of leadership, but only in relation to the patient, not in relation to HR, payment, or any of those other things. And so when it came to the patient, I would go see them, create a plan, set a vision, and then pass that off to the OT assistant. She would work with the patient, do the things that I said, and come up with her own stuff too. And then we come back together and say, this is the progress they've made. This is the things they had trouble with. We problem solve together and go on that. So I'm great at doing that because I have lots of experience with that. But all of the other things like hiring, and what if their notes aren't great and they need to improve said skill? We didn't have to do any of that stuff. And so that was all new learnings.
How did you go through that process? What was learning that process? Was it just trial by fire and, let's see how it goes? Was there somebody that was instrumental in helping you start to build a team? What was that like for you?
My very first mentor, and still on my board of advisors, his name is Bob. He helped me a lot with that. And so he's been with me at the beginning before accessible living was a thing. That whole year of building, I was building and developing with him. And he started in a similar way, even though he's from construction, and helped me really understand that if I get out of my own way, I'll be able to grow better. So his help was really helpful, and I also really like to read. And so I took in a lot of information through books and understanding leadership from a, not so much an academic perspective, but maybe just from an experience perspective from people who have dubbed themselves great leaders.
You have a podcast.
I do.
Tell me about it.
Okay, I have a podcast. It's called Care Lab Podcast. I do it with another occupational therapist because OTs are awesome. Her name is Amelia Borland, and we decided to do it because similar to the OT thing about like people asking me the same questions, family caregivers ask the same questions too, even if the change in status is different, the reason for the change is different. And nobody like gets trained to be a caregiver, even though we almost all deal with it in some form or fashion in our life. And so we wanted to be able to put forward good information in a non-confrontive, non-stressful situation so that maybe when you do encounter that thing, you are like, oh, actually, I do know a little something about this, and now you can go forward, right? So we bring on expert guests, we talk about OT stuff together, and it's all with the lens of like trying to inform all of us who are or maybe will be caregivers at some point.
How's that been going? What's that experience been like for you? I mean, I've had the privilege of watching you, I think, grow as a social media presence. What's your feeling on that? What's that experience been like for you?
It's interesting because I definitely look at the podcast from a business perspective. While it's not really generating us revenue at the moment, we take in a lot of feedback and we try to track as much stuff as possible and we try to give people what they need. The thing is, you don't know a ton. Like if I'm working with you as a caregiver and your grandmother as a patient, like I get feedback, even if you don't tell me or fill out a survey. I can see what's happening. I can understand when things are in trouble because we're working together.
Right.
When you're just putting stuff out into the atmosphere, you kind of don't always know that you're hitting the mark. And so you got to track a lot more metrics. And so that's been interesting to do. And the reason I had not done it before is because I knew I couldn't be consistent with it by myself. And then once Amelia and I met and she was interested in doing it, because I love podcasts as a medium, that's how I take in most of my information these days, I was all about it. So I like being able to share more knowledge and have it be more accessible, which is really the whole key around my career, I think.
Where can people find it?
Oh, you can find Care Lab Podcast on any of the podcast platforms that you listen to.
Okay.
And if you care to go to the website, you can do that too.
Okay. So if you could invent any product, real, magical, futuristic, that would help people live a better lives in their homes, what would it be?
That's a hard question because we have like 600 products on the website. Everything does a different thing. But what's like the one thing that's the thread through all of it that you need at home? And this is gonna sound crazy, but the thing that I would invent is teleportation.
Okay.
Because you know the thing that really causes the most problems is isolation.
Yeah.
And so whether that is not having somebody to talk to, not having companionship, you wanting to help your grandmother take her medicines, but you live states away. Like if we had teleportation, none of those things would be a problem, right? You could stay living in the house that you want to, you get the support that you need, you could have the engagement with the people that you want to engage with, because really it's the social connection and the community is the thing that we're missing.
Anything we didn't talk about that you want to throw out?
That's a good question. I think the one thing I would want to say to the audience is that if you have an idea, you should do it. Entrepreneurship is hard, but it's not the only way to like make an impact in the world. I think it's the way that I should do it. But people have ideas all the time. They throw them out all the time, and they don't ever do nothing with them. And I think whether you are a ESO provider and like you're like, I see this problem with the entrepreneurs in my community. Well, you should do something about it. I ain't got time. You should just do it. You know, if you're in healthcare and you see holes, because we got tons of them, you should start a program, you know, and do it within entrepreneurship. So you're getting a paycheck, you're working for the hospital still, but you're creating value and improving people's lives because you see a problem that has a solution. And if more people just like took the effort to like see their idea to fruition, then I think it would be better.
So if someone's sitting at home, they're seeing this, they want to know how to get a hold of you, they want to know how to reach AskSAMIE to get the help that they need for their loved ones or for themselves, where do they need to go?
Okay, you can go to AskSAMIE.com anytime, ask questions there. Think about it as my brain is available to you anytime you want to. You also can email us there, and it'll eventually get to me. And if you're an occupational therapist and you happen to be watching this, you should go to otconnected.com, and that's the place to join our community.
It's impressive to watch what you built, Brandy, and it's fun to watch you as an entrepreneur. You are, I think I've told you this before, you're one of my favorite entrepreneurs in history.
Oh, thanks.
You do a great job, you have a great presence, and you're touching people's lives in important ways. So thank you for the work and the dedication. Thank you for the energy you bring to the ecosystem and the positive vibes that you bring to my life. I really appreciate that. So
I appreciate you.
it's fun to watch you work.
We got a lot of work to do.
Facts. Thanks for being on the show. Appreciate it.
Thank you.